This is Open Line.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Open Line. A lot to discuss tonight, and we're tackling one of those topics that always gets a lot of debate, and I always find very interesting to discuss. We're talking about guns, and specifically this new ban on bump stocks. Is this new ban constitutional? Bump stocks were banned, and now people who own them have 90 days to turn them in, to surrender them. Obviously, there's some who think that's a great idea. There's some who think that's a really bad idea. And we have with us John Harris, Executive Director of the Tennessee Firearms Association. You think it's a bad idea?
I think the way they went about it was constitutionally wrong. And then I think, unfortunately, it's more show than effect, because it's not going to impact the level of crime in this country. It's not going to make us safer. It was an emotional response to the Las Vegas shootings.
So Las Vegas shootings, Stephen Paddock, he fired 1,100 rounds. He killed 58 people, injured 851 people. Yeah. Donald Trump afterwards said, we're going to ban bump stocks. Mm-hmm. And I think he tweeted out, we will ban all devices that turn legal weapons into illegal machine guns. Yeah. He tweeted that out, I think, in March. So now it's happened. It's happened. And I guess so Donald Trump has apparently wanted it. Why is it bad and not the right thing in your opinion?
Well, let's talk the lawsuit, for example. Okay. Gun Owners of America has filed a lawsuit in federal court to stop the gun owners, the ATF, from moving forward with this rule. Just like all these progressive lawsuits you see on DACA and the border wall, you file lawsuits for everything these days.
Right. Goes to the courts.
The argument in the lawsuit is not necessarily the constitutionality of owning a bump stock type weapon or any other weapon that's had a rate of fire accelerator put on it. The issue in the litigation, and I think it's a great issue that we don't often see, is under our constitutional government, we've got three branches. The legislature establishes public policy by creating laws, including defining words. The judiciary tries to interpret the laws. What do they mean? Sometimes they go beyond that, but that's their core function. And then the administrative branch, which Trump is in charge of, really his job is to just implement the law. Okay? So Congress defined a machine gun in 1934 as a firearm that, with a single function of the trigger, continues to fire until you release the trigger. What the lawsuit is about is that the ATF, which 10 years ago said a bump stock is not a machine gun in a written ruling, said this go round, because it allows a gun to be shot quickly, even though it requires the trigger to be functioned for every shot, it is the equivalent of a machine gun. Well, the problem is, under our Constitution, the administrative branch, the ATF, doesn't get the opportunity to redefine words the way they think Congress should have. So this could go to Congress and they could do this, and then we'd be talking about, is it permissible under the Second Amendment? But this is a much more threshold issue, and it's going to be one that the law is a lot cleaner on, as to whether or not the administration, an agency, can make up new law.
So your concern is just how it was done?
Yeah, first step is how it was done.
And you think that, I think President Trump said, we're not going to take this to Congress, we're just going to do it.
We're going to do it.
We're going to ban it.
He followed Obama's playbook.
And the way it was done was by ATF, I guess. Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. Bureau of Alcohol, is that right?
Bureau. Now it's the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives.
So the way they got this done, the way they banned it, is they said, well, years ago, I guess we had declared a bump stock was not a machine gun, but now we're going to change it, and we're going to say it is a machine gun.
Right.
And by declaring it a machine gun, it is then you can ban it. Is that right?
Yeah, and that's another interesting aspect of this problem. There was a similar type of firearm back in the early 90s that was a sort of aggressive-looking, high-capacity shotgun called a street sweeper. And you could go into any sporting goods store back then and buy them. And the ATF sort of did the same thing with the street sweepers. They were nothing but a shotgun. You had to pull the trigger once for each shot. And the ATF just came along with a regulation and says they have no sporting purpose, so we're going to classify them as a destructive device. Well, when they did that, the people who own the street sweepers had an amnesty period. They could register them, okay? And a lot of people did it. Matter of fact, I acquired one from a client as a fee in a case that he didn't want anymore. But it's all it is. I mean, and so you could own it. When ATF chose to take the bump stocks and make them, according to them, a machine gun as opposed to, say, a destructive device, what they did was they made them contraband, because under federal law, a civilian cannot own any machine gun made after May of 1986.
Okay.
So there's no way that these people that have them can now say, hey, I bought this thing legally, I paid a couple of $100 for it, at least let me register it like I could do with a machine gun or a short barrel rifle or a short barrel shotgun.
So what you've described is a little complicated.
It is.
And then on the other side, you have people who would say, this crazy guy in Las Vegas, on his own, was able to use this device, this bump stock, to massacre a whole group of people watching a concert. And sometimes when we have these reactions to these mass shootings, one of the things that you hear said from people who support gun rights is, well, if we did this or that, it wouldn't really have affected anything. Here's a case where I think it's fair to argue, without that bump stock, not as many people would have been killed. And so one argument is this thing enabled one man to kill 58 people, injure 851 people, fire 1,100 rounds. How important is it to keep this legal?
Well, keep in mind that the Las Vegas shooter could have easily just gone out and bought and registered the machine gun, because civilians can own them under both federal law and Tennessee law. You just got to pay a $200 transfer tax. So if he had done what he did in Las Vegas with a legally acquired machine gun, quite likely the damage would have been worse for a lot of reasons that we just won't go into. So they weren't going to come in and reclassify legally owned machine guns as machine guns. They already were, and you look at it, and as far as I know, this is an isolated incident where one person abused the item, but it's not as if most crimes, bank robberies, mass shootings, whatever, have occurred with these devices, even though they've been out there for more than a decade.
Why is it so important to keep them legal? If it has been abused in this way, and now we know it can be abused in this way, why not? Why can't this be one of those rare things where everyone can just agree?
Well, it may be that agreement could be had ultimately, but I think you got to do it the right way. So you've got to go and let Congress, the people that are elected and that bear the burden of being unelected, debate the issue in a public forum and decide if that's the policy the government's going to take. Or do you let a bureaucrat who's appointed and is not accountable to the public make the decision that essentially was a 180-degree reversal of a written opinion that was accurate that they gave 10 years ago?
And so if it went to Congress, what would the fight be? How hard would pro-gun groups, the NRA or Tennessee Firearm Association, how hard would you fight to keep that language from being changed, to keep bump stocks legal?
Oh, I don't know how hard that battle would be. The battle would more be on the issue of should rate of fire accelerators, the generic category, be restricted or banned, because there's a lot of things that are legally possessed, from shoestrings to rubber bands, you name it. There's a long list that can facilitate rate of fire, including something as simple as taking the gun to a gunsmith and having the trigger springs lightened. All of those things would accelerate rate of fire. Now, clearly the bump stock sort of jumps right to the front of the list because it's the one the public's heard of. But the question that Congress would have to debate, that ATF just completely blew by, is where do you draw the line? And if you can own a machine gun, if you pay the tax, which, like I said, is only $200, what's the difference? If you can own the machine gun, why can't you own the bump stock? And nobody is successfully arguing in Congress that we're going to undo the 1934 Act. It's been out there for 80 years.
Do you think Congress would have passed this? I mean, I think the reason perhaps Trump did this the way it was done is that he didn't want to burden Congress with having to vote on this. Burden meaning, you know, I think gun groups would get up in arms and they would. They would have.
They would see it as a camel's nose under the tent, whatever you want to call it, slippery slope, because the justification for an accelerator being banned of one category just gets, you know, the next time it's something a little less and a little less and a little less, and then where do you stop? Whereas right now the definitions are relatively clear on what is a machine gun and what isn't.
And that gets us to the essence of the whole argument, that there can be no movement or compromise, because if there is any sort of change, then it's the beginning of taking all guns away.
Yes.
And so even something like a bump stock, that I feel like, and I don't have polling, but I feel like there are a lot of people who would say, yeah, that's something that, I mean, President Trump did, and he's a pro-gun guy. He certainly ran that way.
A lot of gun owners will tell you they don't have them, they didn't buy them when they were legal to own, they don't have any interest in it. There's a lot of functional reasons why people didn't want bump stocks, you know. They didn't care if someone else wanted it, just like some people drove, you know, Yugos, and others chose not to. It's personal choice. But some people like those rate of fire accelerators.
Well, all right. Why don't we take a call? Then we'll take a break. But I guess Gabriel is on line one. Hello, Gabriel. Are you there, Gabriel?
Yeah, you can call me Gabe, man.
Gabe. Okay, Gabe, go right ahead. What's on your mind?
Well, I was noticing that you're talking about the bump stocks, and, you know, I'm not so sure that that's the answer to all the problems. I think one solution, which nobody has looked at, is, you know, private security officers. And I believe every private security officer should carry the same ability as a police officer as far as where they can carry their firearm. And I think there needs to be more training in that area so that they can be utilized in such circumstances, such as going to the movie theater with their family. You know, the difference between a commissioned and non-commissioned officer that's commissioned can carry his weapon wherever he wants to. And I think that needs to be what needs to happen with the security or private officers, because there's a lot more of them out there than people realize, you know, when they go to the movie theater or wherever, that, you know, if they had the ability to carry their weapon with them legally, then you might have them more so of a deterrent, you know, along with other people who are like police officers or government officials.
Okay.
Who,
all right,
you know, carry the same weight.
So that's totally different than bump stock, but you're talking about something else. All right, that's fine. You know, what do you think about this? That's a whole separate topic, the private security and all of that. We're going to talk in a moment about the legislature, some of the bills that are coming up. Maybe we can address that.
We can fit it in there.
We can fit it in there. Perfect. All right, if you want to call in, there's the number, 615-737-PLUS, 615-737-7587. We'll take a break. Be back right after this.